Okay, maybe it didn't lead to the same sort of massive lines and toy store mayhem that the release of the Star Wars Episode 1 toys did in 1999, and maybe it hasn't held on as one of the most sought-after items for hardcore toy collectors today, but still, in 1992, Tiger Toys released an action figure that, at least for one particularly dedicated fandom, was very eagerly anticipated. That's because this figure, only once purchased and actually removed from its packaging, would finally reveal the face of a certain character whose appearance had been a mystery for, at that point, 9 years. Yes, thanks to this action figure, fans of the popular 80s animated series Inspector Gadget were finally able to see the face of his evil arch-nemesis, Dr. Claw. The hidden identity of Dr. Claw, only ever shown from behind while sitting in a chair in the cartoon, his arms the only visible part of his body, was just one of the fun elements that children fell in love with when Inspector Gadget debuted in syndication, first with an exclusive pilot in December of 1982, and then as a regular series in the fall of '83. The show centered on the titular character, a clumsy, dim-witted police officer who just happened to also be a cyborg, equipped with various crime-fighting gadgets built into his body. Together with his highly intelligent young niece Penny and their dog Brain, Gadget was tasked with taking on Dr. Claw and his criminal organization MAD, an acronym for Mean and Dirty. While the main hook of the show was clearly Gadget's various bionic contraptions, all activated with his iconic catchphrase, such as "Go Go Gadget Legs," the comic heart of the premise revolved around the fact that, unbeknownst to the clueless Inspector Gadget, it was always actually Penny who solved the crime and helped her uncle apprehend the bad guys. Created by animator Andy Hayward, who had recently left Hanna-Barbera to work for a French animation studio with the perhaps unfortunate name of Dick Audiovisual, the series only ran for 2 seasons, with 88 episodes. But it was a significant pop culture hit, remaining in reruns well into the 90s, and launching a franchise that would later see a sequel series and 2 live-action movies. This was certainly due not only to the clever, toy-ready concept and whimsical humor of the show, but also the entertaining vocal performance of Gadget's voice actor, who was actually the third man for the job. In the show's original pilot, he was voiced by character actor Jesse White, but his performance didn't test well. For the second pilot, they turned to famed radio DJ and voice actor Gary Owens, whose improvised "wowzers" during the record went on to become one of Gadget's signature catchphrases, but producers still didn't feel he was the right match. Finally, they realized it was probably best to just go to the actor who, years earlier, had played another iconic bumbling TV crime fighter that had actually served as one of the main inspirations for Inspector Gadget during the show's development. And so it was that a new generation of TV viewers were introduced to, well, at least the voice, of Don Adams, who had starred in the classic spy parody series Get Smart in the 60s. While his role as Maxwell Smart in that show will always be his most recognizable signature work, his tenure as the animated Inspector Gadget shouldn't be overlooked. Both are popular, fondly remembered franchises, and both even eventually made their way to the big screen. Though there, perhaps, one would even have to consider Inspector Gadget the more successful of the two. After all, at least the Inspector Gadget movie got a sequel. The year is 2008, and Warner Brothers are ready to reboot a classic 60s spy comedy series for a modernized update starring an actor recently crowned one of Hollywood's fastest-rising comic stars, and in the process, hopefully launch the next big comedy action franchise with Get Smart.
10, Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. Something, Bret Hart, Head Start, Fresh Shart, Get Smart.
I thought you were going to go with the old, would you believe my name is Chris?
Oh, nice. Yeah, well, yes. I was feeling less creative today, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, let me play Punch Up. Let me do Punch Up on this. Yeah. So this is the continuation of our summer sweeps. Man, it feels like it was years ago we started summer sweeps. But we got a little pep in our step after Miami Vice, so that's nice. After kicking it off with a couple, I'm just going to say it, two kind of poor quality movies.
Abysmal.
The Avengers and Mod Squad, yeah. Thankfully, Miami Vice brought it back around, so it'll be interesting to see what this fourth entry does for us. That fourth entry being 2008's Get Smart. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about Get Smart? Notice I'm just diving right into it this time.
Yeah, for sure. This man's on a schedule tonight, I guess. Get Smart is written by Tom J. Assel and Matt Ember.
Whoa.
He's a big asshole.
Enunciate that name a little bit more.
Astley. But these guys are 90s, early 2000s sitcom producers and writers. This is directed by Peter Siegel, who made a Chris favorite, Tommy Boy. Tommy Boy is an all-timer for me. He also made Naked Gun, 33 and a Third, a bunch of Adam Sandler films, 50 First Dates, Longest Yard, and Anger Management. This is based off of the TV show of the same name that ran from 1965 to 1970 and aired for 138 episodes, created by Mel Brooks, heard of him, and Buck Henry. Funnily enough, Mel Brooks wasn't super associated with the series after the first season, which is interesting. We'll get to that.
Although you can still feel his fingerprints on it, since he was there to help conceive it at least. Yeah. But Buck Henry stayed on for most of the show's run.
Yeah. The film, the budget of it, $80 million. Domestically, it made $130 million. And worldwide, Trev, this made $131 million. Or sorry, $231 million. Jeez. Huge hit. Hit was Get Smart. I actually... like the poster is, I don't want to say the poster is iconic, but I think it definitely, like, I remembered the poster. You know what I mean? I remembered the marketing. I remembered seeing Steve Carrell everywhere because 2008 was peak Carrell.
Which we're going to talk about, of course. Yeah. No, I think, I didn't remember that it was that big of a hit, but I had a memory of it, like, just like you. I remember, like, this movie being an event. Even in terms of like media tie-ins, we'll talk about this movie representing a very particular time in DVD culture with a particular spin-off element of it. A lot of product placement and kind of commercials tied into Get Smart. So, and then I remember, just the reaction to the film, which we'll talk about. But I do remember it being a big deal when it came out. Although I will say, and spoiler alert, I think this is the case for you too. First time watch for me for this show.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Did you watch the show at all?
I did, so I guess we can talk about the show, right? You already kind of brought up the years of the show, the history of the show. So this is actually, I know, like when we did Miami Vice, I talked about how I had memories of like watching that as a kid. But as I said, I was like really young, like too young to really be watching it. I was just kind of like sneakily watching it because it's what the adults were watching and saying was cool. This so far of Summer Sweeps, this is the show I have the most like familiarity with and most like history with, because my dad was a huge fan of Get Smart and like Mel Brooks in general, so my dad, who I think I've talked about on the show before, like the main reason I'm such a huge movie fan is because of my dad. My dad was also a big movie guy and would take the family to see movies every weekend. We would watch Siskel and Ebert every Sunday morning. My dad was always, when VHSs were the thing, my dad just bought tons of VHSs. When DVDs became a thing, my dad also bought tons of physical media DVDs. And so I just got that from him. But, growing up, there were certain things he got me into, including James Bond, which I think every boy's dad gets them into. But also my dad loved Pink Panther. Right, so I really got into the Pink Panther movies, and those were the two influences for this show, were James Bond and Pink Panther. So I think it's interesting. But also, when I was very young, my dad got me into Mel Brooks. I saw Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, the silent movie, History of the World. I saw those very young because of my dad. And so I can't remember exactly like where in that this falls, but also started watching Get Smart reruns with him, and loved the show. And in fact. And I'll post this for our fans to see. I still have my dad's DVD box set of the complete Get Smart, which is packaged in one of the most annoying like DVD boxes of all time. That's why I want people to see it.
You have to videotape yourself unboxing it. Maybe
I will. I actually will. I do. Yeah. I will do that because people need to see how it unboxes. Because
is it like that? Remember the Alien quadrilogy that opens up to be the length of your family room?
Well, okay. So yeah. Okay. Here's the thing. It's 5 seasons, right? Or 6 seasons. I can't remember if it's 5 or 6, but it's all those seasons are each season's in an individual case. and then all those cases are together in a box. But they did this as a joke, clearly. But I guess the joke is, if you remember the opening credits of the TV show, it's Don Adams as Agent 86, the main character, a secret agent going to the headquarters of his organization, Control. And to do that, he has to go through a series of doors. Right, so they made the box like replicate that, where you have to open it 3 times before you can get to the cases, and then you have to like wiggle the box to get the cases out because of the way they're like in there. Then each case you have to take a slipcover off, and then yes, Chris, each case then unfolds, and it's that stupid thing where it's not like a booklet. You have to keep unfolding. If you want to watch the last disc of that season, you just have to keep unfolding it till you get to disc 6 or whatever for that season. Very, very annoying.
That's great. That's all by design to be the most annoying, funny thing. That has to be. That's great.
Yeah. But no, so I mean, obviously we can talk about like the history of the show and like what it was about and everything. But yeah, long story short, as is never the case with me. Love the show, like a huge fan of it. And in fact, you know, for each of these, I've been trying, or for most of these summer sweeps, I've been trying to go back and like, if I wasn't familiar with the show, I watched some episodes and everything. This one I did the same thing. I pulled those DVDs out and I just like, I watched the pilot and then I picked a few other random episodes. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I hadn't watched them in a really long time. And I was really kind of worried. I was like, did I just think this was funny because I was like a kid, you know, like was it the kind of humor that just speaks to like a kid? And maybe I thought it was funny just because my dad thought it was funny. But no, even visiting it today, it was like great to like go back to it. And I was like, oh, this show still hits, and cool. It still has that clear Mel Brooks and Buck Henry. I don't want to undersell Buck Henry, but it's still got that clear comic sensibility. And I was still laughing out loud watching the show even today.
Cool. I really should go watch a bunch of episodes of the show. Yeah. I know of it. I know the iconography. I know the shoe phone and the theme song and the intro. Like the iconography hits for me.
Well, do you think you know the iconography because of this movie though, or because of the actual? Like, did you know it before the movie, or do you know it? You know, what do you think is what's the connection there?
It honestly probably would have been around the movie. Because, I mean, I'm a huge Mel Brooks fan in general. Like, the movies, Mel Brooks, it's funny, your dad got you into Mel Brooks and Bond and all that. My grandpa did. And I've talked about him before, too, in the show. And Mel Brooks, to me, is like my comic sensibilities times 10. You know, like, most everything he does, I just absolutely love. I've been recently rewatching Curb Your Enthusiasm, either paying attention or just kind of in the background because I've seen it so many times. And the season where Larry is cast in The Producers, opposite Ben Stiller with Mel Brooks. I don't want to give away that season, the reason why he's hired Larry David, but that scene and seeing Mel Brooks and even how Mel still is active and creative in 2024 is mesmerizing. But like the History of the World Part 1, I remember renting that with my cousin who used to babysit us. So we were like really young, me and my brother and sister. And man, we watched that on a whim, and like the gangbang scream when they're like running on the chess pieces just absolutely killed me. Like you didn't really even know what you were watching as a kid, but you knew it was funny because you'd see the adults laughing. And then of course Spaceballs, just really, that's the thing that took off. You know, ludicrous speed, you know, everything. I can repeat that whole movie. But Mel Brooks, I love. Absolutely love him. But for some reason, I guess I just missed out on this show. I think probably just because it was so old, quote unquote, right? Like when I was growing up, you know, yes, DVDs were becoming a thing, but I think at that point in 2008, how old was I? I was like 19, 20 years old. So I don't think I was like looking to watch shows from the 60s. You know what I mean? So
you know, like when I was a kid, I think I'm trying to think where I would have watched it. It must have been like Nick at Night, right? This must have been like a Nick at Night staple, because I know I was seeing episodes on TV, and like, you know, being introduced to them as they were on TV from my dad. So, and I don't know if that was still the case, you know, for you, especially, you know, again, we were in 2 different countries also. But yeah, so I don't know if your like whatever your weird Canadian channels were bothering to show Get Smart.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, because I don't think this was. on that Deja Vu channel that I would talk about. But I caught it somewhere. I don't know.
But this is a show that, like, unlike some of the other ones, like, I would say more so than the Avengers and the Mod Squad, especially, this is a show that held on, like, in the pop culture zeitgeist. And even, like, it came back a couple times, right? Like in 1980, they did a theatrical movie of it called The Nude Bomb. Kind of, I don't want to call it unofficial, but it sort of is, because, Mel Brooks, Buck Henry, none of the other producers of the show or writers of the show had anything to do with it. Most of the cast didn't come back except for Don Adams. Yeah. But then in 1989, they did a made-for-TV movie sequel called Get Smart Again. That led to a brief revival series in 1995 called Get Smart, where they brought in Andy Dick as like the new cast member. That got canceled right away. But it's like they kept like this between reruns and like reboots and stuff. Get Smart never went away, and that's a testament to, I think, the strength of the original run and what Mel Brooks and Buck Henry did with that. So we should say, like, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but like the genesis of the show was that there was a TV executive producer, Daniel Melnick, who basically came to Mel Brooks and Henry and asked them, like, the two biggest things in pop culture right now are, James Bond and Pink Panther. Smash them up. Can you just make something like that? And Mel Brooks loved the idea because he said, like, he was kind of just sick of regular comedies on TV. As he says, I have this quote from him: "I was sick of looking at all those nice, sensible situation comedies. They were such distortions of life. If a maid ever took over my life like in the show Hazel, I'd set her hair on fire. I wanted to do a crazy, unreal comic strip kind of thing about something besides a family. No one had ever done a show about an idiot before. I decided to be the first," which is a great Mel Brooks, kind of take. And so that's what he does, right? He says, like, let's take James Bond. And the amazing thing about this is he even acknowledges that the James Bond movies, especially the ones in the 60s, were already so outlandish that, like, you didn't even have to do much to make like the gadgetry part of them and everything kind of funny. He said he would just look at the James Bond franchise and he said we would do what they did except just stretch it half an inch. But then his big idea was like, well, instead of being like James Bond, the super sexy, suave, can handle anything secret agent, let's make our secret agent, Maxwell Smart, played by Don Adams, a complete like imbecile. But he's a very interesting character because he's clumsy. He's kind of like a nincompoop. He makes a lot of mistakes. But when push comes to shove, as it does in most episodes, he's also like a really capable agent. He's really good at hand-to-hand combat. His hunches are often correct, and he really is like kind of considered like the star agent of Control. So it's a really, really unique lead character in that he's like both bumbling, so you can laugh at him, but he's not so bumbling that you like hate him or think everyone else is dumb for trusting him. I think that's like a really smart key to like what they created here. And
he's not like Bond that he plays it by the book. Yeah. Like he wants to do things all within the rules and policies that are put forward in Control, in the good organization, the good spy organization that he's part of, unlike Bond, who likes to go outside the lines, and take things to the nth degree. And that's what I think makes the comedy fun with Maxwell Smart, is that he plays it by the book, but he's a dumbass. So he's like a lovable doofus, and that's what's fun about it.
And then the other key characters were his partner, Agent 99, played by Barbara Feldon, who was a pretty like revolutionary character for the time, in a couple different ways. In that, first of all, she was sometimes allowed to be as funny as him, which is again not always the case for the women in shows like this. But she was also shown as being as capable an agent as him, which was really kind of unique. And even like Barbara Feldon was taller than Don Adams, and that was something TV executives tried to avoid at the time, was having the woman tower over the man. But no, she's like often his partner, and through most of the seasons, it's like very clear. Like they kind of play this where she's clearly in love with him, but he's kind of oblivious to it. But ultimately, over the course of the show, they finally acknowledge it and get married. And then the third member of like the little trifecta there is the chief, played by Edward Platt, who is of course their boss and gives them their missions every episode. And a lot of the comedy comes from just the ridiculousness of the initial meetings where they come into his office and he tries to explain the mission and Maxwell's never getting it. But yeah, it's I would definitely recommend going back and watching some of it. It does have like you said, I know Mel Brooks only created it. He did he worked like a lot on the early episodes and kind of took off after the first season. But Buck Henry kept the spirit alive. Buck Henry, this is interesting because there's certain celebrities that have this like amazing heyday and then just like completely vanish to a point where you think like future generations just have no idea who they are.
Right.
And I think of Buck Henry as one of those, because you could, if as we keep saying, I'm sure we even have listeners like, why do they keep bringing up this Buck Henry guy? Just talk more about Mel Brooks. But you have to understand, like, Buck Henry is as important, and he's no slouch either. This guy co-wrote The Graduate. He co-wrote a bunch of other like really important films. He was one of the original SNL 5-timer hosts. He was like a frequent host of the original run of SNL. Yeah. Cool. I guess modern audiences today he's like popped up in he still pops up, like does a lot of guest spots on TV. But I'm guessing most people probably remember him as Liz Lemon's dad in 30 Rock.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so he's of course leading to the great joke about him having a lemon party. But yeah, so he's like, he wrote The Graduate. He wrote Catch-22, Owl and the Pussycat, What's Up, Doc, Day of the Dolphin. He also wrote Heaven Can Wait, the Warren Beatty movie. So he's like a really big writer too, and was a celebrity, for a time. And so it's just weird how, you said Mel Brooks has remained like this like comedy icon who even today is like recognizable and a star. And then Buck Henry is one of those guys, maybe because he's like primarily a writer. I don't know. It's just like I feel like for whatever reason, even after hosting SNL multiple times, he just never became like that same kind of comic icon. Probably because he never led a movie or something.
Well, that's got to be part of it. Mel Brooks is a big personality, right? Like he's the kind of guy that you probably like. He's probably never off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's always on at every single gathering, at every single function, every award show, and that's great. That's why we love Mel Brooks. But he's very much the showman. And I think if Buck Henry was his number 2, that really did kind of go on and run the show, which is pretty crazy. Because what was it? He served as a story editor through almost the entirety of the show. So it's always funny when you see like the headliner almost take over. Like Mel Brooks only worked on the first season. I don't think he had a single thing to do with anything after the first season. Wild.
This is kind of like how I don't know if this is a 100% analogy, but this is kind of like how the What We Do in the Shadows TV show, people like still talk about it being like this Taika Waititi thing.
Totally.
And it's really Jermaine Clement. I remember, and like, they of course worked on the movie together. And I remember, and like, but Taika Waititi was the bigger name, right? Because he'd had those hit movies. And
also another guy that just doesn't know when to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, but I remember there was a great thing where after like the first season of What We Do in the Shadows like really hit, some like entertainment like publication put out a thing saying like, how did Taika Waititi manage to make a show as funny as the movie? And Jermaine Clement tweeted that and wrote, the way he did it was he called me up and said, "Hey Jermaine, can you go make this show for me?" And just really quickly too, before we can talk more about like kind of like the jokes of the show and everything. But I do want to say the other, of course, key element of the show was Don Adams. And Dom Adams is a guy who, this was kind of like one of those best case, worst case scenarios, because in getting this show, he was this like kind of, I think like a working man's actor at that point. He'd been around for a bit, doing some like smaller supporting roles. He has really interesting kind of just personal history. He fought in World War II. So he's got this like military history. I think then he started doing stand-up. He was primarily stand-up. They find him, they cast him as Maxwell Smart. And it's this like, obviously, instantly iconic character. The show is an instant smash success. I believe he wins the Emmy for Best Comedic Actor like 3 years in a row for it. And obviously, it like defines his career, but it also is his career. Right? It's the kind of character he can never break away from, and so he pretty much spends the rest of his life. As I said, he kind of tries to bring back Get Smart. He does a bunch of commercials as Maxwell Smart even after the fact. He really never has another signature character except for one. If you haven't seen Get Smart and you're kind of wondering what Don Adams like kind of comic sensibility is, or what, because like one of the big things was how distinctive his voice was. Well, he later went on to voice Inspector Gadget, who was based primarily on Maxwell Smart in particular, like in terms of the performance. Yeah. So if you remember what Inspector Gadget sounds like, that's Don Adams doing that voice as well.
Oh, cool.
And, so
I love that cartoon as a kid. Love that.
Oh yeah, yeah, me too. And thankfully they made a sequel to that shitty movie, so we never have to.
I saw that Matthew Broderick one in theaters with my mom.
And I believe the sequel was he was replaced by French Stewart, if my memory serves correctly.
You are correct.
Yes.
that one I never watched, but the Matthew Broderick one was enough.
But yeah, so like the Get Smart show, it really, like if you've seen those early Mel Brooks comedies we were talking about, that's that kind of very proudly silly, satirical, style. That's very much what Get Smart was. Not afraid to just play things very silly. A lot of humor coming from, Maxwell Smart, like Agent 86, like misusing his gadgets or just the ridiculousness of the gadgets in the first place. A lot of like verbal humor, a lot of slapstick.
Max, can you give us an accurate description of that man?
I'll never forget him as long as I live, Chief.
99, write this down. How tall was he?
Let's see, 5'8", maybe 9. Make that 10.
Suspect under 6 feet.
Or over.
What color were his eyes?
Well, that was hard to tell, Chief. He was wearing dark glasses.
What about his hair?
He was wearing a hat.
Did he have any noticeable scars?
He was wearing a suit.
No, I mean on his hands or neck.
He was wearing a scarf and gloves.
Did you notice anything about him at all?
He was a very snappy dresser.
But just really, taking the piss on the whole, like, the suaveness and the coolness of the James Bond kind of feel. And really kind of pitching more towards what, Blake Edwards and Peter Sellers had been doing with the Pink Panther movies.
And one thing I want to mention, because I'm sure we'll talk about it with the movie, is the dialogue was rarely ad-libbed.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a huge part of what we'll talk about with the movie, but Mel Brooks has a very precise, I guess, and Buck Henry, because they both have written such gems. But, to make a great comedy, a lot of the time it's on the page.
Well, that's the thing. Like, even I just watched, so like over the past couple of days, I watched 4 or 5 episodes, and it is like you watch it, and like you said, like this movie, we have not even getting into our thoughts of it, but this movie is like indicative of a very particular time in comedy where they were letting like the actors run wild.
The Apatow era.
Yeah, the Apatow era, saying like, let's get funny people and let them riff, and then we'll put like the best stuff in the movie, and then we'll put all the extra stuff on the DVDs, right? And I'll even talk about that for a moment with like the Get Smart DVD.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like just let them run wild. But when you watch an episode of Get Smart, you can tell these are not actors riffing. These are like obviously written jokes.
Exactly.
Because they're like set up. They're like the joke is in the script, and in fact, they're very important to even the story. How it's not just like, oh, let's ground the story to a halt so that we can do funny like riffs for like 20 minutes. No, all the jokes in an episode of Get Smart are built into the plot of that episode.
So why did this movie get made at the time it got made? As you've been noticing with our summer sweeps, is that the mid 2000s, everybody wanted to make a TV show adaptation for theaters. Next time we're going to talk about another one too. So Land of the Lost came out in 2009, so 1 year after. So there was a lot of that going on here. And the man of the hour is Steve Carrell. From 2004 till 2010, I mean, The Office is on fire. Like the show, not the one that I'm sitting in, but the show was the biggest thing for network TV. And Carell explodes with a 40-year-old virgin, and
well, he explodes as a leading man. We should say, like,
yes,
before
that's
that.
what I mean.
He's kind of credited as like he has these like scene-stealing like supporting roles in Bruce Almighty, and then really importantly as Brick Tamland.
Evan Almighty.
Well, no, we could talk about the Evan Almighty in a second.
Yeah.
Obviously, Brick in Anchorman. Is
Exactly.
when people like really sit up and go like, oh wait, what's this guy? And then even after like, so then the next year is 40-Year-Old Virgin, which explodes him as like, oh my god, this guy can be a Hollywood leading man. And then he has that really interesting 1-2 punch where the next year he's also in Little Miss Sunshine.
Yep.
And suddenly it's like, oh man, this guy can do like the really goofy, like Apatow comedy 40-Year-Old Virgin, but he can also be in those kind of like dry, dramatic, tragic comedies like Little Miss Sunshine. This guy maybe can do it all. So it's like, it really, I remember at that time, it really felt like, oh my God, are we seeing the ascension of like the next big comic icon, right?
Totally.
Like, I remember like at the time, like comparisons to like Steve Martin and all that stuff. Like, and yeah, I mean, should we talk a little bit more about what goes on between that and Get Smart? Because you already mentioned like Evan Almighty, like Dan in real life. I don't know. I know
He starts to jump into voice work as well.
Yeah, I guess the point I want to make is, I know Get Smart was a huge hit, so you have to throw Get Smart in there. But other than like 40-Year-Old Virgin and I guess Get Smart, on like a live action lead level, I don't think Steve Carell ever exactly became what was expected of him at that point. Would you agree with that? Like it's interesting. He's a guy that's like never gone away. He's obviously still marketable to a certain degree, and like he'll always be able to like just do another like I can voice Gru in another Minions or Despicable Me movie and make a shit ton of money because that franchise ain't going anywhere. But like as a live action leading man, I don't know. I feel like in movies it never took off.
Yeah, well, in movies, and I think the problem was he was trapped.
Yeah,
like he was trapped on The Office.
Yeah, and I think people just only wanted Michael Scott from him.
Totally.
It's the Don Adams problem, you know?
You know what? That's so funny. You're 100% right. And I think The Office trapped him there. And so much so that, he bailed early, right? Mm-hmm. And I know they offered him a shocking amount of money to stay, but he just was like, no, get me the fuck out of here. And to do other things. And then he went on to do, he tried to do some interesting stuff with Foxcatcher. I don't know. Did you see Foxcatcher?
Yeah, I mean he's fine. Like he got nominated for an Oscar for that, didn't he? Or
yeah, he did. I think he did.
Yeah. I remember thinking it was like okay. I like when he dives into like more dramatic stuff, even if it's like or even just like slightly like comic drama,
Mm-hmm.
I think Steve Carell's a talented actor. He's one of those guys I have nothing like against. But I'm just kind of putting like, especially as like a lead, I haven't been excited about a Steve Carell movie in a very, very long time.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you are, it's more of an ensemble thing, like Anchorman 2.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody's excited for Steve Carell when they're going to a Despicable Me sequel, right? They want to see the dumb
and even
minions.
like by 2010, just 2 years after Get Smart, you think of like something like Dinner for Schmucks. Like my memory of that was kind of by the time that came along, I feel like the tide was already turning on him a little bit, where people were like, ugh, Steve Carell, so it's like it happened very fast with him. I feel like
and now he's doing what has he been doing? He went like The Big Short and Vice, and I know we're just kind of naming his credits off, but it is an interesting career to where he started to where now he's doing political dramas, and then the awful Space Force.
yeah. He has like a small role in Asteroid City, so it'll be interesting to see if he becomes like maybe. There's always a possibility that you then join like the ongoing rotating like acting ensemble of Wes Anderson, which for him might be a good step because it's a little bit more critically acclaimed. But the thing we have to also acknowledge he has Office and Despicable Me money. So
exactly. He doesn't
have
need
whatever
to be
kind
doing
of career he wants.
Yeah, like he doesn't need to be doing anything. His roles are purely a pastime at this point. It would feel like, right?
Yeah. I just brought that all up because I think it's interesting to like remember that for 2 or 3 years we thought he was like the next Steve Martin or Will Ferrell, and it just never really happened. But one of the biggest TV stars of all time is nothing to sneeze at. So,
no. Remember the time that Anne Hathaway was coming up and everybody loved her, and then there was this weird backlash against her in the last few years, and then finally it's kind of coming back around to her. Let's talk about her a little bit, because I'm a huge Anne Hathaway fan.
I love Hathaway.
Like when I was younger, when Princess Diaries came out, like I saw that movie a lot. I have a younger sister, but also that movie is like, I think genuinely really fucking good. It feels like a different generation's She's All That. Just for like, it's kind of, it's an iconic movie, I think. But she's great. And then she Devil Wears Prada. She's awesome. She's stretched a lot, and she's a great dramatic actress. She's a good action actress, I would say, and she's just very sweet and charming and super hot as well. I just like Anne Hathaway. But there was a moment, was it around Les Mis? I think it was then, right? When everybody hated her.
Les Mis and Dark Knight Rises were like both the same year.
Right, 2012.
Yeah, and Dark Knight Rises, you have to remember, also was like, it was liked, but kind of not as liked as the Dark Knight. And then because of those two movies, she was just everywhere, and then she was pushed for the Oscar for Les Mis, which she won. Right. Yeah. And she was suddenly doing a lot of press, and that was definitely when I saw like what you just talked about. But the thing is, this is and I think we've talked about this before. This is something that happens with almost every like up and coming actress. There's a moment where everyone decides. This happened to Jennifer Lawrence too, right? We've already kind of seen it happen to Rachel Zegler, where just everyone decides like, no, like we gotta like shit on you for a while. And with Anne Hathaway, it was always like particularly annoying because I felt like all the criticism was always like, oh, she's got theater kid energy and she's trying so hard. It's like, yeah, I mean, she seems like she's having fun. Like, I don't know. Like, that was always like a strange complaint to me, because from what I saw, whenever she was asked to do something very funny, like her appearance on Between Two Ferns, and, you know, like kind of comic bits on like talk shows and stuff, she just seems so game. And I just couldn't understand like why people were like so sick of it.
People are jealous. That's just what it is. You know, a lot of these, you see that up and coming actress being good at seemingly everything, and I think there's a large portion of the audience that just becomes jealous of it, and then, like you said, decides no, enough is enough. You're not allowed to be happy because I'm unhappy, and I think Anne Hathaway is definitely a victim of that. Doesn't help that she co-hosted that god awful Oscars. Thank God she came out of it more or less unscathed by James Franco. Totally,
Sleepwalking his way through that.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think because even like coming out of that, like the next day, most of the reviews that I saw were kind of like, well, she was trying.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
It wasn't thrown at her, but yeah.
Yeah, but I like Anne Hathaway, so I'm glad you do too. I figured you did, but it's and it's nice to see, especially now recently, like she's been doing some interesting work in the last couple of years again, and people are coming around to her.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad why it's happening. I feel like she has had to build her career back up. I think what we just said actually did hurt her. And you know, she was in like a couple of movies that didn't hit as much as they wanted, and then people were like kind of, you know, had turned on her. So I think you see her now. Almost everything she's in now, she's also usually a producer on. So I think she's become very, very aware of, I have to manage this career and I have to like kind of build my reputation back up. And I think she's had her big star moment. And I think right now she's more interested in doing like, you know, great performances in smaller movies and just kind of like reminding people, hey, actually, I'm awesome, you know? So I think she'll hit again. I think there'll be some like big project she'll get attached to. But for now, I like that she's just like, now I'll just do stuff like, like Eileen and Armageddon Time and things like that. So
Yeah. So like, again, going kind of back of like why they made this movie. I mean, these two stars were up and coming. So
well, and it's like I said, it's a property that, like, in doing just a little bit of research, it's a property that certainly Hollywood had flirted with doing before. Right. I think there was always like a thought of like Get Smart could be a movie property, and I think you probably had a lot of filmmakers at the time who had grown up on the show, you know, and even like, so we said Peter Siegel, this is kind of like a little bit of I think the movie was going to roll along with or without him. It's not like he started the movie, but he was able to kind of cash in a little bit of a blank check kind of thing after doing 3 Adam Sandler movies in a row. And he was kind of asked, like, what would you like to work on now? And he kind of knew this movie was in development. And he said, like, I loved Get Smart when I was a kid. I loved that show. So he gets attached to it, you know. And I think that was a lot of it was, everyone remembers this show. It was a well-liked show, well-liked enough that they kept trying to bring it back. I'm actually really surprised this movie didn't happen, like, earlier in the 90s after the success of the Naked Gun movies. So it's interesting that the director of the third Naked Gun movie ends up making it. Because there's always been... Like, well, I don't know about always, but like, to me, like the obvious comparison point of Get Smart was always Police Squad and The Naked Gun, and so much so that I've never heard the Zuckers talk about this, but I've always wondered because the Get Smart movie in 1980 is called The Nude Bomb, and then when they make a Police Squad movie in the 90s, they call it The Naked Gun. And I've always wondered, was that them kind of as a nod to Get Smart, or even them taking a shot at Get Smart, saying like that movie, no, you know, that movie wasn't well liked, but we're going to do the good version. We'll make the name something very similar. But I've never seen them actually acknowledge that. But it's like it's too close to me. It's really weird that like here's these two like comic parody, you know, detective secret agent shows. And like when they both got made into movies, their titles were The Nude Bomb and Naked Gun. That's just too close. And obviously, whenever people talk about parody films, it's also always Mel Brooks and the Zucker brothers, right? And those are like the two like classic runs of that. So once the Naked Gun trilogy came out and was like such a big deal, especially those first two, I'm kind of surprised Hollywood didn't like leap on Get Smart at that point, but instead they were too busy making that 7-episode only aborted Get Smart reboot on Fox with Andy Dick.
You didn't want to watch Andy Dick in more shows?
You know, actually, probably I don't remember that show at all. I'm guessing
I don't think
Andy
Andy Dick does.
Yeah, well, yeah. I liked Andy Dick on News Radio, which is actually the show he bailed on Get Smart to go work on, which
Yeah,
good move
yeah.
on his part, But yeah, so that's certainly not why why I avoided it at the time. I think it probably was just like the writing was on the wall that this is a bad idea. Even Barbara Feldon has said, because she came back for that show, and she said that when she walked on set like the first day, it was already clear to her it wasn't going to work, because she just said, oh, this is actually like something that should have stayed in the 60s. Just like that comic sensibility. And
Right.
we'll talk about that with this movie, right? She said like she could just tell this is a show out of time, and it's like it's not working to try to bring it back with this like 90s sense of humor.
Do you want to start talking about the movie proper?
Yeah, I guess we can. There's not much more to say about the making of it.
There has always been a delicate balance between chaos and control.
My name is Siegfried, and I represent Chaos. Over the past few months, we have assembled a stockpile of nuclear weapons, which we distributed to unstable dictators.
Now, with that balance threatened, it's time to turn to one man.
How do I know you're not Control?
If I were Control, you'd already be dead.
If you were Control, you'd already be dead.
Neither of us is dead, so I'm obviously not from Control.
That actually makes sense.
Around the world, our people are under attack. Chaos has learned the identities of all of our field agents. They hit us, and they hit us hard. Fortunately, we have a new agent.
Who's that, sir?
It's you, Max.
I request a cone of silence.
Oh, I'm so happy! I'm so happy! This is the best day of my life!
You didn't push the button hard enough.
Right. 99.
I feel really good about us as partners.
Wow, impressive.
I set that up.
Is this your stapler?
Yeah.
If you don't follow the rules, then what are we?
We're not people who jam staples into other people's heads. That's CIA crap.
Did you see anything while I was dancing?
Just once, but I don't think you expected him to lift you so high.
Missed it by that much.
Tuesday's not gonna work. Cannot do Tuesday. Mom! Sean! See how annoying that is.
When members of the nefarious crime syndicate Chaos attack the U.S. spy agency Control, the chief has to promote his eager analyst Maxwell Smart to field agent. Max then partners up with veteran Agent 99 and jets off to Moscow, where they have to blend inexperience, enthusiasm, beauty, action, and ineptitude to thwart a nuclear plot hatched by the evil Siegfried.
Good. So this is a first time watch for both of us, but as you said, I have much more history with the show, so if you don't mind, I'll talk first. And I'm going to be honest with you, Chris. This is a discussion, an episode I've been dreading a little bit, but not for the reason people might think when I say that. It's actually because this, to me, is like the worst kind of movie for us to talk about, in that I ultimately thought it was just fine. I just have kind of no strong feelings about this one way or another. So I was trying to remember why I avoided it so much when it came out. Because it seems like I would have seen this in the theater, but I really think if I can put myself back in the mindset of 27, 28-year-old me, I probably was in that that mindset of being like, Steve Carell's not Maxwell Smart. Don Adams is Maxwell Smart. Really probably was that thing you can't redo Get Smart. You can't put Get Smart in this Apatow style comedy thing. And I kind of still feel that way, but ultimately sitting down to watch this, I didn't hate it. I just didn't love it. I just sat there, and there were a couple things that made me laugh. I thought a couple moments were really in the spirit of the original show and pulled it off. Other moments I thought really missed the mark. I just think, ultimately, I wonder if I liked this. I want to say like it. I think I was maybe more accepting of it now watching it and being like, okay, that's fine, because it was at least indicative of a time when we got comedies like this. And all I could think while watching it was I kept thinking about how dead the mainstream Hollywood comedy is right now. I'm going oh yeah, at least this movie reminds me of that pretty cool period of like the 2000s where every year we were getting a bunch of these, right? Let's get like a bunch of like funny people, put them together and make a very silly movie. And that's all this movie's trying to do. And to that, I have to give it credit. I really, this is not a movie I watch and think is like spitting in the face of the show. I think their heart was in the right place. I think for the most part, I think they were trying to really do like an updated version of the show. And like, you know, I think there was like some love involved. But I think, you know, it's never as funny as the show. And I think that's very much like they don't have a Mel Brooks and a Buck Henry. No offense to those sitcom writers you talked about and to Peter Siegel. They don't have the same comic voice. Steve Carell doesn't have the same kind of comic energy as Don Adams. He's obviously funny, but it's not the same kind of energy. So yeah, there's some misses here, but also there were some moments that I thought were funny, and there were some funny performances. I want to single out Alan Arkin as the chief in this. I thought was maybe like my MVP of the movie. He like made me laugh quite a bit. I think there's like a couple funny cameos. But yeah, ultimately this movie was just like one of those like kind of straight blank lines for me. Even in like the presence of one of our favorites, franchise Viagra himself, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, like. Even he, to me, was like, he was just fine in this. And I was like, oh, this is even a point in his career. He hadn't become the Rock you and I hate yet, right? Yeah. He's just like the guy who's like, yeah, I'll do this movie and I'll do what's asked of me, and it's totally fine. and that's what I would say about the movie is I'm interested to see if you agree. I just thought this was like totally fine. So like, it'll be interesting to see how we try to talk about this, because I was like, yeah, it's a movie that exists. I watched it. I'll probably never watch it again, but whatever. I had a good enough time.
Yeah. My mother-in-law listens to our podcast. And like as soon as it drops, by the way. So she's a big fan of ours. She was dreading listening to this episode because she just absolutely despises this movie. Like, just hates it. And I was like,
is she
okay.
a fan of the show?
You know what? I haven't asked her yet, because she told me that like a couple weeks ago before I had even watched the movie yet. So I will be talking to her soon, because I need to know why she had such a vitriolic experience towards the movie, because I'm right there with you. Absolutely everything you've said is basically my notes. I think this is the worst movie to talk about, because it's just okay. It's a totally watchable romp, and it actually does something, because I'm going to give some credit first before we talk, because, I mean, it sounds like we're going to talk good and bad about it, but to find a happy medium. But this does what I've been saying in the other episodes in Summer Sweeps, what is the goal of a TV adaptation going to theatrical? And the goal is to play in the spirit of the property that it's based on, right? It's supposed to give the old fans tidbits and Easter eggs and fun little things that they remember, right? The member berries, you got to do those. And also you got to up the stakes and up the action and make it worthy of the big screen. And I actually think this movie does that, almost on all accounts. The issue is that where it goes bigger with the action, it loses sight of the humor. And I think the action's fun, the set pieces are fun, but the humor is never as funny as it should be. And it goes back to that like precision that I talked about when it comes to Mel Brooks. They ad-libbed almost this entire film. And so much so that Steve Carell had mentioned that there's potentially 4 hours or four full-length movies worth of footage that they could make from this movie. And in a weird way, that does kind of go against the spirit of the movie. Yeah. So I think that's what's actively hurting it.
I mentioned this earlier, the DVD, and this was like very common of the time.
Right.
The DVD has an option where you can watch the movie as is, or you can watch the comedy optimization mode, which adds in like 17 minutes of alternate jokes. And it even says in the front, it's like, as a joke, it's like now it's like 67% more comedy or something. So it's just like, oh, watch them riff more,
Yeah. And I think another reason why this movie, I guess, fails to reach a cultural zeitgeist and to reach into the people's memory is Austin Powers came out first. And I think Austin Powers made it very hard for anything after to spoof James Bond. Goldmember only came out 5 years before this movie.
Yeah, and people had already turned down even Austin Powers by then.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I just think that this movie, it's just not as precise as it should be, and it's still fine. Like I keep saying that it's still fine. A lot of stuff did make me laugh. I mean, the cameo, the one in the tree, made me laugh really hard. Yeah. That was great. One of my favorite jokes that felt very Mel Brooks inspired was Max is listening to some Russians in a bathroom, and he's peeing at the urinal, and he keeps stopping and starting to listen, and then they keep looking at him, so then he'd pee again. That humor was really good. When Anne Hathaway introduces Max as her deaf driver, and then the guy talks to Max, and then Anne Hathaway's like, just go park the car, and then it holds on Steve Carell's face, and he goes, "Oh God." That made me laugh. It has on-location filming in Moscow, which is pretty great, and something that, I mean, we'll see if we ever see that again. Man, there was some funny things. We have Masioka from Heroes fame. Wow, what a moment in time, hey, 2008.
I know, yeah.
Like, holy shit, that guy was everywhere, and then nowhere. Also, the guy, for the sidekick from Borat, who I actually met at a college tour in 2008. He came up to Canada, and I met him. Yeah, there's some fun things here. I don't know. There's some fun things here, but it never pushes it over the edge.
Can I tell you the two jokes that made me laugh out loud?
Sure.
The first joke that really got me is when Agent 99, Anne Hathaway, gives Max like a microphone to put in his molar. And she tells him, like, so I won't hear anything outside of your mouth, but if you just repeat things, I'll hear it. But he doesn't understand that he can just talk at normal volume. And when he meets Terrence Stamp as the villain Siegfried, who is also a villain from the show, and he says, like, my name is Siegfried, and Max is like, did you say Siegfried? Like, really loud. That made me laugh. Just anytime he did that.
Yeah.
And then the other one, I'm telling you, Alan Arkin, man, the great Alan Arkin, just this guy, man, like just a line killer. When there's a car chase late in the film, and he's in the passenger seat, Max is driving, and they're smashing through all these different things. And they end up smashing through, like, I don't know, some kind of like seafood stand or something that has a stuffed swordfish on it.
Oh my God,
the swordfish smashes through the windshield. And then there's a moment where, and it's like, and it almost hits the chief. And Max is like, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And the chief says,
I don't know. Were you thinking, holy shit, a swordfish almost went through my head? If so, yes.
That's a great joke.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's some good lines in here. And I guess, I mean, I like the cone of silence bit was funny, like,
which is a recurring bit in the show, in a lot of episodes.
And for listeners, in the show, again, Maxwell Smart likes to play by the book. So every time they have a meeting in Control, he's like, we have to lock it down, and we have to go into the cone of silence, and we can talk without just in case Chaos is listening to us. And inevitably, in every episode, when they use the cone of silence, it malfunctions. And the way it malfunctions here is really funny. It's a CGI cone, of course.
Yeah, I didn't love that.
Didn't love that. It looked like they were just wearing like goop on them. A lot of callbacks to the show that were definitely obvious, but also who cares?
I kind of had mixed feelings about that because I felt like the show created like a lot of catchphrases.
Right.
And a lot of like recurring jokes. We said, so you have the shoe phone, you have the cone of silence, and then you have like a lot of Maxwell Smart isms. They can't, would you believe, where he says something and someone's like, I don't believe that, and he just kind of keeps downplaying it. And there's just like these different things, and it's like the movie feels like they have to hit on them all. And every time one of those happens, it's kind of like I was suddenly reminded I'm watching a Get Smart movie. Whereas like when you're not doing it, it's kind of like you can kind of get lost in it just being its own silly secret agent movie. And then he suddenly has to stop to do like, oh yeah, that's the Don Adams thing. But like I said, like I get it. Like they had to do it, but it's just like, it's never as funny as Don Adams, and it just kind of reminds you of that.
Sure, but I guess it's more or less like you can't. I mean, it's a double-edged sword with that one.
It is like this is the complicated thing, because I wanted to mention this earlier because you brought up like the action and everything. The tough thing about this movie is I feel like the times it fails the most is when it's trying to Get Smart the most, when it's trying to like replicate the exact things from Get Smart, and then the other failures are when it gets the furthest away from Get Smart. where it goes like, let's also put in big Hollywood action. And you're like, oh, that doesn't fit here either. You know, like the movie is at its best when it's just kind of playing in the same silly humor that the show traded in, but doing its own new humor. Like you said, like the peeing joke and everything. And it's just doing its own thing. Those are the best moments. I think when it like is like, hey, here's one of those classic lines from the show, or when it's like, hey, here's like, fighting a guy in midair scene like you'd see in Mission Impossible. You're kind of like, I don't need that here, but
you got to make it worth it for on the big screen. So like it's kind of.
Well, I mean, this is the tricky thing about this movie, and you already mentioned another tricky thing, and I want to extrapolate that and push it even further because you talked about this having the difficulty of coming out after Austin Powers. But I'll push that even further and say the thing about the Get Smart show and why the original run of the show probably was like much more successful than, the 1995 reboot and everything, and even the Nude Bomb in 80, is that that's coming right when the Bond series had started.
Right.
And
totally.
it's like it's parodying a new thing, It's like the Bond movies are new and people are like really eager to see something kind of poking fun at it. By the time you get to 2008, the Bond series itself has gone through several reinventions and has kind of become self-parody, like under both Roger Moore and even to some degree under Pierce Brosnan. And then it's had to come back from that. There's been so many other like spy parodies by that point, not just Austin Powers, but so many other like Bond like kind of takeoffs in the years since that this couldn't have the same sense of the new that the original show did. So it had a lot kind of working against it, and that's why it was really difficult. Like obviously it did well, people liked it well enough, but making a Get Smart movie in 2008 had very unique challenges that the movie has a hard time overcoming.
Did you like when the movie became a Saw film? When Max starts shooting all these arrows into his body and face?
Well, actually, I do think that's one of the funnier parts.
Yeah, same. I liked it a lot. I thought it was really... I was kind of shocked by how much he was impaling himself with the arrows. Yeah. But it works. I really like Steve Carell. I think he's good in this. He's that deadpan, lovable doofus that I think you do need in this role. Like I do... Obviously, I don't have the attachment to Don Adams, but... Steve Carell does seem like the right choice, you know what I mean? Like what more do you want from this character or from this performance that you're not going to get out of Steve Carell? You know what I mean?
I know that my takeaway there is you're right. I think like I said, maybe the main reason I avoided it is not even like a hatred of Steve Carell at the time, just more being like, well, it's nobody can play this part other than Don Adams.
Right.
And then watching this movie and going, well, I guess if anyone can, actually, Steve Carell is doing it really well. And I know like they'd also thought about, like Jim Carrey at one point and Will Ferrell. And I think those guys would have been terrible, even though I like both of them. But they both have elements that wouldn't work for this. And I think Steve Carell, to me, he's not as funny as Don Adams, but that's also just the movie's not as funny in general. But he's actually nailing like what Don Adams brought to it. And like you said, in that he plays like the imbecile, but you also totally believe when he's capable as well. And I like that the movie gets that right, where Maxwell Smart is not earnest, he's not a complete idiot. It's just that he's kind of bumbling. He makes like little mistakes here and there. He's overeager at times and things, but he's also actually a really good agent. In fact, he's such a good agent at what he does. In the movie, this is like an origin story for him, and that he's like an analyst for Control. And he's like the best analyst the chief has ever seen. And so even though he's like nailed his tests to become a field agent, the chief doesn't want to promote him because he's like, you're too good of an analyst. I need you here. And then just through a sequence of events, like it turns out the kind of the crux of the movie, the idea, and this is actually kind of a funny comedic conceit too. And there's some good jokes of it. Like he has to go out into the field while all the usual field agents have to stay back and do the jobs of the analysts. And I thought there's some pretty good comedy there too, of seeing like, David Koechner and Terry Crews as the field agents who don't know how to use like a copy machine. Like that stuff's got some comedic juice too. But yeah, he's like actually really capable. There's a great moment where he comes into the Control base early on in the film, and it's been taken over. Right, the bad guys have come in and they've taken out all the other agents, and that's when he first meets Agent 99, or I guess second meeting after they're cute on the street. But they start working together to fight the agents, and there's a great moment where he like grabs a fire hose and like throws it out into like where the bad guys are standing, and then turns it on so that it starts going wild and like knocks them all out. And it's like that would have been very easy to make it play like, oh, he thinks this is going to work and it doesn't, but no, it does work. So I like those moments where they go like, yeah, when push comes to shove, he's actually very good at this job.
Yeah.
He's actually a really good agent. He's a crack shot, as we see in one of his training sequences. He comes up with very clever ideas. He is a good agent. He's just also kind of bumbling sometimes and kind of clumsy. So I like that they nailed that. And I think Steve Carell has that comic persona where you can buy him as both being very competent and very stupid at the same time. And that's a tough thing to pull off.
I completely agree. And when you're too much of a doofus, you start to ask, like, how did they get this job? Mm-hmm. And that's why I always loved things in The Office where Michael Scott is obviously a dum-dum, right? But he's a good salesperson. Mm-hmm. And the best parts of The Office is when you see him close a deal, or his little tricks of the trade of writing people's which is something I actually adopted when I first got into sales, was, when you kind of keep a Rolodex of people's business cards, and then you write on the back of like, oh, they have, a couple kids, they have a dog, so the next time you talk to them, you can just relate. And there was always those little moments in the show where you're like, oh, that's why Michael Scott is running this branch. And you never doubted it. Yes, he was stupid and he could say the wrong thing, but he was always well-intentioned and, again, good at his job. And I think a lesser movie, and not saying that this movie's great, but even still a lesser movie makes your hero a total imbecile.
Yeah.
That it's frustrating, it's annoying, and you just don't care about them at all. And I think in a movie like Get Smart, I have to root for Maxwell Smart. I have to root for his relationship with Agent 99. I have to see their sexual tension, or not even sexual tension, like romantic tension, or even friend tension, that they can rib each other a little bit, but also there's an underlying hint of charm and charisma, and they actually get along. And I think with a character like Maxwell Smart, he needs to be competent in some way. He just can't be a total buffoon. And in this movie, I think it just nails that.
Yeah, again, it's weird to say for a movie that I think both of us are just kind of like, it's okay enough. But I do want to give it that same credit, because the easiest thing in the world would be to make this movie and just say like, okay, let's make him the dumbest agent ever.
Totally.
Because then it writes itself, right? Then the jokes are obvious. Like, oh, everything he does fails, but he kind of keeps failing upwards. Mm-hmm. And that can be funny if you have a really talented comedic performer. So that's what Peter Sellers was doing with Clouseau. But those movies are smart enough to know that's the joke, right? He's such a bad agent that even his boss hates him and is trying to get him killed and send him on these terrible missions, But here, it's actually kind of, I don't want to say, I'll say brave, but I'll put like 100 asterisks on it. But it's brave of them to say like, okay, let's actually make this guy a pretty competent agent. And then you've removed the comic crux of saying like, well, we can just make every joke about how much he sucks.
Yeah.
So now it's like, well, how do we make it funny when he's actually good at his job? And that's tougher. And the movie pulls it off, well enough to like at least make it, pretty watchable.
Again, that's kind of the reason why I think there's a mistake by doing too much improv in the movie. And it can kind of slow down the scenes. It can slow down the pacing a little bit. And not every joke works. And I think in a show like this, or in a movie like this that's based on a show like that, you need it to work almost every single time. You need a precision. And like Anne Hathaway got this job because she auditioned purely to work with Carell, and she was the best one at improvising with him. And I think in the movie it shows, like there's definitely some chemistry there, but the Apatow era really, people took the wrong the wrong lessons from the Apatow era. Mm-hmm. The movies got overlong. Oh my God!
I'm glad you said overlong, because I was just about to say, can we just say also one of the crucial problems here is this movie is 110 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Which this movie clearly,
tight 90,
like most comedies, should be 90 minutes. There's a reason. Again, the show worked very well because you can pack a lot of jokes in 30 minutes and then everyone's happy.
Mm-hmm,
you get a little 30-minute spy story, 30 minutes of Maxwell Smart and Agent 99, being silly and fighting chaos, and then we can turn on something else. And here you're asking us to stick with it for like about 2 hours, which means, and the movie knows that like, you can't just have the jokes for 2 hours. So they, like I said, that's where they're like, well, let's also put in like actual like big action scenes and try to make the plot like a little bit more involved than it needs to be. And that's what grinds this to a halt at times, as well as, like you said, just sometimes stopping and saying, let's just let the actors do like a bunch of riffing.
I want to mention another thing I liked, something that was actually very funny and shows the competency of Smart's intellect and his job. You know that big guy, the heavy of the movie?
Dalip Singh, who like wrestling fans would know as the Great Khali.
Yes. So he's in the film playing the heavy, and
like Siegfried's like main muscle. Yeah.
Yes. And earlier in the film, it's set up that Smart listens in on Russians' conversations, and the Russians' rooms are bugged and everything. Chaos is bugged, and he likes to learn. He's learned Russian, and he takes notes. And in the beginning of the movie, he's like talking about, yeah, I know that this person ordered this coffee. This person likes his toast like this. Like, it's very mundane things, and everybody laughs at him, right? Well, later in the film, when the big guy is basically going to kill Anne Hathaway, Agent 99, Smart gets to his heart by saying, "Hey, I know you. I know what you like in your coffee. I know that you're having problems with your wife, and I know she talks to her sister about you, and her sister's just speaks ill of you, and I'm here to help you. I can understand you on a human level." And then like the big dude like goes up to him, and it looks like it's intimidating, like he's gonna grab and kill Smart, but instead he hugs him, and then he goes under his breath, and he's like, her sister's such a bitch. That made me laugh. I like that joke as well. So that was good.
That was like okay, but I think what I did like was like in the immediate aftermath of that, when the building's on fire and they're trying to escape, and the big guy comes up, and it looks like he's gonna help them, and instead he just like leaves them, like swings over there by himself, and Smart is just instantly like, oh, he's helping us, and instantly he's like, oh, what an asshole, he just left us here. But that was a good joke.
What a Tom Astle. Anyway.
Can we? Can I say like another maybe problem with the movie though, and I guess just to lead to like one of the odd things about this film. I don't know if I would want to call it a problem, because like whatever, but the movie definitely overvalues and overestimates how much the audience is going to get a kick out of Bruce and Lloyd, the characters played by Masioka and Nate Torrance. So Masioka, as we mentioned, is Hero from Heroes, if everyone remembers. Nate Torrance sounds like a guy that pops up on like a lot of TV. But they play the two like tech guys that control Bruce and Lloyd. And boy, if you want a sign of how different Hollywood was in 2008 to what it is today, let's talk about how big the DVD market was back then.
Yeah.
So big. And so confident were they that this movie was going to be a hit that while they were filming this movie, they filmed a spin-off. So yes, even though we were doing this movie, even though this movie never got a proper sequel, there is another movie in this universe. There is Get Smart Presents Bruce and Lloyd Out of Control, a like companion film, a 70-minute companion film showing what Bruce and Lloyd are up to during the events of this movie.
Wow.
Where it turns out that they like have also been, because we see them like the different like inventions they make throughout the movie, but it turns out they've also made this invisibility cloak, but then it's stolen and they have to go get it. But the movie's made to be like, oh, this is all happening during Get Smart, and this was released on DVD only 11 days after Get Smart hit theaters. So they're like, oh man, after 1 week, people are gonna have Bruce and Lloyd mania. And here's the even crazy thing is, they weren't necessarily wrong. The DVD sold 100,000 copies and made $2.2 million.
Crazy.
So yeah, just insane. And it's just like, oh my God, like maybe we should do that movie too, because they never made a second Bruce and Lloyd. But I don't know if I'll be rushing to watch that anytime soon.
No.
It's just so rare that exists. And Steve Carrell not in it, but it does say Anne Hathaway has an uncredited cameo. She shows up in that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just weird that even happened.
DVD markets were wild. Like we have another stat here from when the DVD of Get Smart was released in the UK. It sold over 2 million copies and generated almost $35 million in revenue. These are the things that saved films back in the day. You know, like when a movie would underperform, which this one did not. This one was a huge hit, like we said, with $231 million worldwide. But a $35 million DVD sale in the UK. That's only accounting for the UK and not accounting for Blu-ray at the time either. It's actually kind of shocking that we didn't get sequels with this one. Throughout the years, Steve Carrell has been asked about it. In 2010, he says, yeah, I get to look at, I'm looking at a script for Get Smart 2. I'm kind of doing a once-over on it. I really want to do it. And Hathaway seemed game. Alan Arkin seemed game. And then 2013, he was asked about it again. He said it'd be fun. And then 2019, Peter Siegel basically said it's too much time has passed. It's not going to happen. And also, unfortunately, Alan Arkin had passed away. So it does feel like this movie should have made a sequel. Like, is it because the other two just got too big? Is that the reason why? Like, is it everybody was just too busy?
I think definitely. I definitely saw some that said like Anne Hathaway star really rose really fast after this, and so she would have been like a harder one to get back, just like schedule wise, because then you got to make sure her schedule lines up with Steve Carell.
Totally.
I think this is kind of the case because, like I said, the movie was a huge hit. You're right that there was probably a lot of irons in the fire trying to get a sequel made pretty quickly. But I think ultimately, and this happens sometimes, we've seen it with some other movies we've looked at. We just know it from like other examples we can think of maybe over time. But like a movie can be a hit, but everyone comes out of it still going like, well, it was a hit, but people didn't love it. Like everyone kind of had the reaction we had, where it was like, yeah, it was okay. And I think it probably gets in their head a little bit. And I would imagine people like Carell, Hathaway, maybe even Peter Siegel are like, okay, if we're going to do a sequel, it has to be better. We made a movie that was a success, but now like actually let's make one that's as funny as like what people wanted it to be originally. And I think that's why Steve Carell said that he didn't like the first script and then he tried to rewrite it. I think they got in their heads of saying, I bet you Get Smart 2 is a project that had like multiple drafts.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to like crack the code and say, can we actually make this as funny as everyone wanted it to be? And I think over time, they probably wrote so many different drafts and tried so many things. I bet you it ultimately just burned them all out. And it got to a point where they're like, let's just give up on this. We made one that like made more money than we probably expected. Let's just get out while the getting's good. And like I said, comedies do have a short shelf life. You can't wait 8 years and then do a Get Smart 2. You had to make it the next few years to even try to get like the Austin Powers kind of trilogy maybe. So yeah, I would have watched it. I have a feeling a Get Smart 2, maybe a Get Smart 3, I probably would I'd have the same reaction. I'd watch it and go like, yeah, okay. But like, sure, I would have watched it.
Yeah, same here. I like this well enough. It is. I didn't feel like I wasted my time watching it. I just thought it was, again, an enjoyable romp. Like, I'm not going to think about it ever again after I edit this thing. But yeah, Sandy, what the hell? Why are you so mad about it? Please text me right now as you're listening, and we will debate it.
Yeah, like, cause like my only thought could be like, wow, was she that like big of a fan of the show? But like I said, I'm a fan of the show, and like I said, like I think this movie's ultimate victory was that I watched it and went like, okay, that's not as good as the show, but it didn't like take a steaming dump on the show.
No,
this is not a movie.
I think it respects the show. I think it pays tribute well enough.
Companion piece to the show. Yeah.
That's a really good way of saying it, a companion piece. Yeah, I completely agree.
If this was like packaged in like a new DVD set of the show and it's like it also has the movie, I wouldn't be like, get that out of there. You'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. It can be there.
Yeah. The Rock.
All right.
Okay, we're not going to talk to him about him a lot right now, but if you really want to hear our feelings about the man, go listen to the Baywatch episode. Go listen to Black Adam. We really go in deep on that guy. What'd you think of him here? He was fine, right?
He was fine. To talk about some things, I'd have to like get into spoiler territory, but I will say it kind of reminded me of like what we thought The Rock was going to be early on.
Yes.
You think about where this falls in his career, and this is not, franchise Viagra Rock yet. This is like still trying to find his way, Rock. This comes in the middle of like a run of like he's doing like, so this is a couple years after he did Southland Tales. We've talked about Southland Tales before, how he goes really out there, makes Richard Kelly's follow up to Donnie Darko. He's really actually pretty awesome in that movie, but the movie is like too weird and too confusing. People don't like it, and he gets scared, right? He's like, I don't know if I want to make those kind of movies. I don't want to do experimental movies anymore. So he starts making like kind of more safe stuff, like Gridiron Gang, The Game Plan, and then here with Get Smart. But I don't know. Should we get into spoiler talk for just a second here? Like, does anyone care?
I don't know. Do we have to?
Okay,
Does it matter?
let me cut
This
that
one I
out
could
and
see
I'll just
people maybe. This one I could see maybe people checking out.
cut that out, and I'll say it in a different way.
Okay.
So, like I said, to like avoid like kind of some plot specifics, I won't talk exactly about what I mean here, but I will say he's asked to do some things in this movie comedically that he would never do today.
No,
You know?
never.
Yeah, in terms of like the way he allows his character to be portrayed and to be presented, and it just went and he's good, right? You watch it, and you're like, yeah, again, you're matching the tone of the movie, and it's like he's totally willing to be a piece of the ensemble. That's what I noticed.
Yes,
right. He knows what his role is here. He knows his role and shuts his mouth, as he would like to say. He's like, I'm not the star of this movie. I'm very much being asked to do this part. I'm being asked to do this thing because it would be funny, and I'm going to do it because it suits the movie the best. And I go, and you watch it and you go, yeah, he does have the charisma, and like, damn, it's a shame that later on he got like two in his head. Of course, you even go back and like listen to some old interviews with him talking about this movie, and he's like very much, you can hear that already starting, where he's like talking this movie is a very like kind of calculated, piece of his like game plan. Well, no pun intended. Game plan of the movie maybe for us.
It was important to me to become a good actor. Over time, I knew it was going to take time, how was I going to do it? Well, because I came into the business in an unconventional way, the best thing that I could do is to surround myself with really good actors, good directors, hopefully find good material, and understand the business from top to bottom. Marketing, distribution, actors, whatever it is. I just, I got to infuse all these things in my head and try and learn it. I'm comfortable now. And I feel comfortable talking to you about it now and having a wide array of roles to choose from in all different genres, and have found really great success in different genres, and found some big bombs too, by the way, which I've learned from. But at the same time, you always got to prove yourself. You're only as good as your last movie, to me, and you're always looking to improve, you're always looking to grow, and that should never end. I don't think that type of enthusiasm to grow and not only improve, but then prove yourself as well, that shouldn't end. It won't end with me. So I think I'm going to be 50 years old looking to prove myself.
But yeah, he's totally fine in this, and like, yeah, this is when I still kind of liked him, and this was like a reminder of like, yeah, there was a reason you used to like him, because he used to be not the egomaniacal monster he is now. I wonder if on this set, I doubt on this set he was making people carry away his bottles of piss.
Yeah,
like he does nowadays. Yeah,
which is an insane story that came out, a couple weeks ago. Of course, we have been planning on talking about this movie for months and months now on our schedule. We plan way in advance, by the way, listeners. But yeah, a couple weeks ago, it comes out that there's a report that over the years, The Rock, he doesn't want to waste any time, right? And he's got to get his workouts in at fucking 3 a.m. or whatever. And then he's got to be on set, and he's got to be always working. Even though there's so many other reports of him, never showing up on time, yelling at everybody around him, just forcing everybody to abide by his schedule and his mantra before everybody else. But the report was, he wastes no time, so he pisses in his water bottle and he hands it to his like assistants and interns to dispose of, because that like. If that's not ego, if that's not the epitome of ego, I don't know what is. And it sucks because, again, we used to like this guy, and I actively like avoid watching him in movies now, and I think like there was a time I used to love him on social media. When I used to have social media, I loved watching The Rock on social media, and now he's just I don't know, he's a corporate stooge, just I don't know. Go listen to those episodes that I said.
Like in this movie, like this is before he like made his body like like
totally natural,
natural. Yeah, he's like big in this, but he's like believably big, and he's still got the hair, and like he's clearly like more playful. This is the Rock I miss. Like whenever I think about like why it's so regrettable to me that I just like find him so aggravating today, it's because I'm in the early 2000s. He was more like this, right? He was more like, hey, I'm here to play with everybody else. It's like that pee bottle story is insane. You've heard that he, like the story is he gives it to his assistants and they just go and take it and throw it away. My theory is that's actually Zoa energy. That's where that is.
Another thing that was funny that we were talking about The Rock back in the Black Adam episode last year. Me and Trev talked about what we think he should be doing. And isn't it funny that soon after it was announced that he's going to make that wrestler movie for A24? I think it's just funny how we got our finger on the pulse here at F2F.
But did you see the news today? He just hurt himself making that movie, so now he's going to be
did he?
Well, yeah, he got like an elbow injury or something. So now he's going to be like, well, I'll never, no more of that. I'm never trying to make a real movie again, you know what else? I really quick. You know what else like really dates this movie? Besides like being like a Rock who's like willing to be part of an ensemble.
Yeah.
James Caan is in this as the president.
I love James Caan.
And it's like he's funny in this, but it's all clearly like haha George W. Bush, you know?
Oh, totally.
And it's like I was just watching and thinking like the jokes are about like how kind of George W. Bush is such a good old boy and just kind of like dumb and slow, you know. And I was thinking like, oh man, there was a time where he was thought of as like the worst president, and like the jokes are about how he's so bad because he's just kind of dumb, you know, and he's like a good old boy, and I'm just like, oh, the days when like that was the worst president as an American.
Again, there's something about a lovable doofus that is better than a total incompetent asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also funny too because those jokes were a little dated by the time the movie came out.
They were,
you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's also some like 2000, like for the most part, I think the jokes are fine and like kind of like harmless and like whatever in this movie. There are some jokes in this that by 2008, I think we've kind of moved beyond. There's a lot more like haha aren't fat people funny jokes in this than a 2008 movie probably really needed. You know.
Speaking of, in 13 minutes into the movie, there was 2 Subway product placements, very egregious ones.
Yes.
And then there's a plot point that Max used to be fat, and he got thin to be better at his job. Weren't you waiting for it to be a true Subway commercial? And it never actually happens.
Like with the Jared cameo.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, what year was he busted? What year did that happen? That would have been before this or after this. I mean, right?
Oh yeah. He was only busted. I mean, who knows anymore? Time is a meaningless well of. Anyway. But
the Subway product placements is very funny because like the first one, like maybe my first laugh in the movie was like 10 seconds in the movie when Max opens his fridge and he just has a fully wrapped Subway sub in there. We're just ridiculous, you know. And then the later one where it's just like very predominantly in the background as him and Anne Hathaway are talking on the street. Yeah.
So we already answered this if we wanted sequels. I mean, I would say that I would have watched them. Yeah, sure. That's the answer. Yeah, like I would catch them on a Sunday afternoon Netflix viewing, you know? But it's hard to I know we've actually been strangely positive for a movie that, we avoided for so long.
Yeah, and a movie that I might never watch again. But
totally.
But I think that's the thing. I think in my head I was really expecting the worst. I think I'd built this up to be something so much worse in my head. I think I was going in being like, oh, this is gonna be like one of those, because there were some very funny comedies at this time, but there's also some like ungodly, unbearable comedies at this time. We're getting both of them, and I think, like I said, just the fact that this was like totally fine, and also like I said, the fact that we don't get movies like this at all anymore, just made it more like tolerable and even kind of like charming to me. So like I just kind of ended up coming away from it going like, yeah, okay. I can't say I'm glad I watched it, but I can't say I'm mad I watched it. So it's just one of those, you know.
Some may say that this movie missed it by that much.
There you go. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. I've been waiting. That was in my notes. I was like, we got to get to that. Well, that'll do it for Get Smart. If we convince you to watch it, good.
Sure.
You'll have a adequate time, I think. Next episode is a big question mark, though. It's I mentioned it earlier. 2009's Land of the Lost, the Will Ferrell vehicle there. So, follow. Do you have anything else to say, by the way?
No.
Okay. Okay, I might keep that. Follow along at F2F Pod. That's at F2, the number 2F Pod. That's on all the socials, so like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be great. And just join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And keep on with us amongst summer sweeps. pretty cool. That'll be our 99th episode, by the way, of the main feed. Sometimes we do little spin-off shows here and there. But, episode 99, 2009's Land of the Lost.
Agent 99? Oh, man, see, we should have planned this better. We
did, yeah. We should actually put this even episode 86. Like, there were so many numbers of this one, but
yeah.
Anyway. I guess we didn't really talk about Terrence Stamp at all, but that's probably a big reason why you need a good villain too, and he's just kind of there.
Yeah, actually, I think that's maybe another part of, like, if the movie had like a funny bad guy, maybe be like a little bit better.
Like a Dr. Evil.
Yeah.